In the quiet village of Riom, deep in the northern plateau, lived a beautiful woman named Zakiyya. From a young age, everyone admired her kindness and charm. She had many dreams, but the greatest of all was to marry a man she truly loved and build a family. However, life didn't follow the path she had imagined. When Zakiyya was just 18 years old, her parents arranged a marriage for her with Danladi, a wealthy cattle owner from a neighboring town. Zakiyya didn't love him, but her parents insisted that Danladi would give her a better life. Feeling trapped and with no choice, Zakiyya married Danladi and left her village. Life with Danladi wasn't what Zakiyya expected. Although he gave her everything, clothes, jewelry, and even a big house, she felt lonely. Danladi was a strict man, much older than her, and treated Zakiyya like one of his belongings. He rarely spoke with her except to give others, and he hardly noticed how unhappy she was. Years passed, and Zakiyya bore no children, which made things worse. Danladi blamed her for not giving him an heir, and the love that was never there turned into frustration. Zakiyya's sadness grew deeper with each passing day. One rainy day, Zakiyya met Bako, a kind gentleman from her old village. When she went to visit her parents, Bako had been her childhood friend, someone she once thought she might marry. Seeing him again stirred up old feelings Zakiyya had buried. They spent time talking about the dreams they once shared, and for the first time in years, Zakiyya felt seen and loved. Bako made Zakiyya laugh again, something she hadn't done in a long time. Before she knew it, they fell deeply in love. Zakiyya started visiting her village more often, sneaking away from Danladi's house to spend time with Bako. She didn't mean for things to get complicated, but love as a way of creating impossible choices. One day, Bako asked Zakiyya to marry him. He told her, "We can have a better life together. Leave Danladi and we'll build a new home." Zakiyya was torn. She knew leaving Danladi would bring shame to her family, and she feared what people would say if they found out. But she also knew that life with Bako would bring her happiness she had never known. After many sleepless nights, Zakiyya made a bold decision. She would marry Bako in secret. They had a small ceremony in the forest, witnessed by only a few trusted friends. Bako promised to love and protect her forever. For a moment, Zakiyya felt free, as if she had finally taken control of her life. For months, Zakiyya lived two lives. With Danladi, she remained the obedient wife, hiding her unhappiness. With Bako, she found joy and peace. But soon, things started to unravel. Zakiyya became pregnant, and she wasn't sure who the father was. Panic filled her heart. If Danladi discovered her secret, it could mean disaster. Divorce was not common in their culture, and Danladi's pride wouldn't let him forgive such betrayal. As her belly grew, Zakiyya knew time was running out. She tried to keep her secret hidden, but people in the village began to whisper, "Why is she always going to her parents' house? Isn't she Danladi's wife? Who is that man she's always with?" Zakiyya's worst fear came true when Danladi's brother Yahuza spotted her and Bako together one afternoon. Yahuza wasted no time in telling Danladi everything he saw. Furious and betrayed, Danladi stormed into the house that night, demanding answers. "Zakiyya, who is that man? What are you hiding from me?" Zakiyya's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to think of what to say. But before she could answer, Danladi grabbed her by the arm. "You will not disgrace me," he shouted. Zakiyya knew that if she told the truth, Danladi might do something terrible. The village was now buzzing with rumors. Danladi was determined to find out the truth, and Zakiyya knew her days of pretending were over. She couldn't hide the pregnancy much longer, and soon both Danladi and Bako would demand to know who the father of the child was. Would Danladi throw her out if he found out the truth? Would Bako still love her if the child wasn't his? Or would the two men fight over her and force her to make an impossible choice? The night was cold, and Zakiyya sat by the window, rubbing her swollen belly. She knew that whatever happened next would change her life forever. But she had one question burning in her heart. Can love and truth ever survive together in a world filled with lies? The moonlight fell on her face as Zakiyya whispered to herself, I have to make a decision, but which life do I leave behind? The next morning, Danladi was restless. His anger simmered beneath the surface, and he paced back and forth in their compound, waiting for Zakiyya to confess. He hadn't told anyone else what he suspected. He wanted to deal with it himself. Zakiyya sat quietly on the mat, her heart pounding as she tried to keep her hands steady. But she knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came spilling out. Later that day, Danladi sent for Yahuza to accompany him. We are going to her parents' house. I need to find out why she's sneaking off there and who this Bako is. Zakiyya overheard them talking, and fear gripped her heart. If they confronted Bako, things might turn violent. She had to stop them somehow. Just before Danladi and Yahuza left for the house, Zakiyya blocked their way. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Please, Danladi, don't go to my parents' house. I will tell you everything, but not like this. Danladi's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? You better speak now, Zakiyya, before I lose my patience. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to gather her thoughts. The man you're looking for, Bako, is someone I have loved for a long time, even before I married you. I didn't plan for things to happen this way, but it happened. Danladi's face darkened. You married me and promised to be faithful. Now you tell me you're in love with another man? Zakiyya nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know how to escape, Danladi. I didn't want to hurt you or my family, but I was trapped, and now she placed her hand on her swollen belly. I don't know which child I carry. Danladi staggered as if the ground beneath him had shifted. Yahuza, standing beside him, whispered, This is a shame, a disgrace to your name. Danladi clenched his fist, his whole body trembling with rage. You betrayed me. You made a fool of me in front of everyone. He stormed inside the house and returned with a leather whip. Today I will teach you a lesson, he shouted, raising the whip. Zakiyya screamed, covering her belly with her hands. But before the whip landed, a voice interrupted them. Stop! Everyone turned towards the gate. It was Bako. He had heard about Danladi's visit to Zakiyya's parents' house and knew trouble was coming. Without thinking twice, he had rushed over to protect Zakiyya. You will not touch her, Bako said, standing tall in front of Danladi. Danladi glared at him, his anger boiling over. You think you can take my wife from me? Do you know who I am? Bako didn't flinch. Zakiyya deserves happiness, and if you had treated her well, none of this would have happened. The tension in the air was thick. Yahuza tried to calm Danladi, but it was no use. Danladi threw the whip to the ground and said, If she wants to be with you, let her leave now and never return to my house. Zakiyya stood frozen. Her heart turned in two. If she left with Bako, it would bring shame to her family and forever sever ties with Danladi. But if she stayed, she would never know true happiness. Bako stretched out his hand. Zakiyya, come with me. I will love you, no matter what. Danladi crossed his arms. Make your choice now, woman. If you leave, you and that unborn child will mean nothing to me ever again. Zakiyya's mind raced. How could she make such a decision? And what if the child truly belonged to Danladi? Would Bako still stand by her? Just as Zakiyya opened her mouth to speak, a sudden pain shot through her belly. She gasped and clutched her stomach. "The baby! It's coming!" she cried out. Both Danladi and Bako rushed to her side, their anger forgotten for the moment. "We need to get her to a midwife," Bako shouted. Without wasting time, the two men carried Zakiyya towards the nearest midwife's hut. As they ran, Danladi's mind raced. What if the child was truly his? Could he forgive Zakiyya and accept her back? And for Bako, the question lingered. Would Zakiyya still choose him after the baby was born? Or would she return to her husband? They reached the midwife's house just as Zakiyya collapsed in pain. The midwife, an elderly woman named Amina, ushered them inside. "Leave her with me. I will do everything I can," she said. Both men stood outside, pacing back and forth, each lost in his own thoughts. Hours passed, and the night grew darker. Then the door creaked open, and Amina stepped out, her face tired but calm. "It's a boy," she said softly. Relief washed over the two men, but Amina's next words sent chills down their spines. "But there's something you need to know about this child." What? Danladi and Bako leaned in as Amina continued, her voice low and serious. "The baby was born with a birthmark, one I have seen before." She glanced at Danladi. "This mark is the same as the one your father carried, a crescent moon on his left shoulder." Danladi's breath caught. His father had always told him that the mark would appear only on his firstborn child, a sign of continuity in their lineage. Danladi staggered backward, whispering, "The child is mine." Bako's face twisted with confusion and anger. "What are you saying? How can you be so sure?" Zakiyya didn't even know whose child it was. Amina shook her head. "This mark is not just a coincidence. In your family, it only appears on the rightful heir." Danladi's anger quickly shifted into a twisted kind of triumph. "So you see, Bako, this child is mine, not yours. Zakiyya stays with me, and this chapter ends here." He folded his arms and stood tall, his pride swelling. The gods have made their decision. Bako's heart sank, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. "Zakiyya didn't marry me for a child alone. She married me because she wanted love, something you never gave her." He stepped forward. "You think she will stay just because of this baby? Love doesn't work that way, Danladi." Danladi's face darkened again. "Love? In this land? Love means nothing if honor is lost. She made a vow to me first. The vow binds her, child or not." The door creaked, and both men turned to see Zakiyya standing at the entrance. She looked exhausted but determined. With the newborn baby wrapped in her arms, she stared at the two men, the husband who owned her by law and the man who had captured her heart. Danladi reached for Zakiyya. "Come home. This is your place, Zakiyya. The child is mine, our heir. You cannot stay with Bako." Bako's voice was soft but firm. "You don't have to go back to him, Zakiyya. You deserve happiness, even if it cost us everything." Tears filled Zakiyya's eyes. "I have tried to please everyone but myself," she whispered. "I thought I could live two lives, but now I know that was wrong." She looked down at the baby, whose tiny face was peaceful in sleep. "I know this child will grow up asking questions. He will want to know who loved him and who truly cared." Her voice grew shaky. "I must choose, but whatever I decide, someone will get hurt." The silence between the men was suffocating. Both waited, holding their breath as Zakiyya clutched the baby tighter. "Danladi," she began, her voice cracking. "I know the baby is yours, But love cannot grow where I feel trapped. Danlade's jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with fury. So you will leave me for this man? Zakiyya closed her eyes, struggling to speak the words she had feared to say all along. I need time. I need to think. Danlade's pride wouldn't let him give her time. You have two choices, Zakiyya, he said coldly. Come back to me now, or I will disown both you and this child. You will be nothing in the eyes of the village. Bako stepped closer. And if she chooses me, what will you do? Will you drag her back by force? Danlade smirked, an unsettling expression that sent chills through Zakiyya's spine. No, he said slowly, but I will make sure the village knows what she has done. Let them decide her fate. Zakiyya's heart pounded. In their culture, being shamed publicly could ruin her forever. Even her family might abandon her to avoid disgrace. Bako reached for her hand. I will stand by you, Zakiyya, no matter what happens. Zakiyya looked at the two men. The safety of tradition versus the freedom of uncertain love. One part would protect her child's future, but cage her in misery. The other promised joy, but came with heavy consequences. She knew she couldn't delay much longer. Every moment spent waiting only made things worse. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, an elder from the village appeared at the gate. The elder, Malam Yusuf, had heard whispers of Zakiyya's secret marriages and the chaos they had caused. He stroked his long beard thoughtfully and said, "This matter cannot be settled here. Both families must meet, and the truth must be told before the council." Zakiyya's breath itched. A public hearing before the council meant every shameful detail of her life would be exposed. The elders would decide her fate and the fate of her child. Would they let her stay with Bako, or would they send her back to Danlade bound by tradition? Malam Yusuf gave a stern look to both men. Tomorrow at sunrise, bring your families to the village square. There we shall see who is right, who is wrong, and what must be done. Zakiyya felt the weight of the baby in her arms. She had thought the hardest part was over, but the real trial was just beginning. Bako gave her a reassuring squeeze. Whatever they decide, Zakiyya, I will not leave you. Danlade muttered under his breath, we will see about that. As the sun began to set, Zakiyya stood at the center of her two lives, knowing that tomorrow will bring the moment of truth. The next morning, the entire village gathered at the square. Whispered conversations filled the air as people exchanged rumors about Zakiyya's double marriage and the scandal it had caused. Some pitied her, others judged her harshly, and a few were simply curious to see how it would end. In the front, Malam Yusuf sat with the other elders on a raised platform. Zakiyya stood quietly, clutching her baby, with Danlade on her right and Bako on her left. Both men looked tense, ready to fight for what they believed was theirs. Malam Yusuf raised his hand, signaling for silence. Today, we gather to hear a matter that concerns not only this woman, Zakiyya, but also two men, Danlade and Bako. We will hear both sides and decide what is just. Danlade stepped forward, his voice sharp and clear. Zakiyya is my wife. I married her first, paid the bride price, and followed every tradition. But she betrayed me by secretly marrying Bako. She disrespected me, our family, and our customs. He pointed at the baby in Zakiyya's arms. This child belongs to me, and by right, Zakiyya should return to my house. The crowd murmured, nodding at his words. In their culture, a woman could not marry another man while still legally tied to her husband. Bako clenched his fist, but kept his voice steady as he spoke. Yes, Danlade married Zakiyya first, but a marriage without love is like a cage. Zakiyya came to me because she was not happy with him. I accepted her, knowing the risk. I love her and I will stand by her even if the council decides against me. Some people in the crowd scoffed at Bako's words, but others whispered that love too was important, even if it went against tradition. Malam Yusuf nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Zakiyya. You have heard what both men have said now. Zakiyya, tell us your truth. Zakiyya stepped forward, her heart pounding. She glanced at the faces in the crowd. Her parents, Danlade's relatives, Bako's friends, all eyes were on her. Taking a deep breath, she began. I made mistakes, she said softly, holding her baby close. I was scared. I tried to make everyone happy. Danladi, my family, and even myself. But I ended up hurting everyone instead. Her voice cracked with emotion. I didn't want to leave Danladi because I feared the shame it would bring my family. But I didn't want to stay in a marriage that felt like a prison. So I went to Bako, hoping I could find peace. But now, I stand here before you, broken and lost. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued. I don't know if I made the right choices, but I do know one thing. This child is innocent. He deserves to grow up knowing love, not hate. I beg the council to think of him when you make your decision. The crowd fell silent, her words heavy in the air. Just as Malam Yusuf was about to speak, an older woman rose from the crowd. It was Zakiyya's mother, Aisha. Her face was lined with sorrow, but her voice was strong. There is a way, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. The child can belong to both men. The crowd gasped in shock. What do you mean? Danladi demanded angrily. Aisha stepped forward, her voice steady. The elders can decide that the child will bear both Danladi's and Bako's names. They will share the responsibility of raising him. Zakiyya will not be forced to return to either house unless she chooses to. The elders whispered among themselves, considering this unusual idea. In their history, no such arrangement had been made before. Malam Yusuf raised his hand again for silence. This is a strange proposal, but it is not without wisdom, he said. Zakiyya will be free to decide her own path, and both men will share the child's upbringing, if they agree. Danladi's face darkened with fury. Share my child? Never! I will not have another man claim what is mine. He turned to Zakiyya, his voice low and menacing. If you don't come back to me today, Zakiyya, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Zakiyya trembled under his harsh gaze but stood firm. I will not return to you, Danladi. I cannot live like that anymore. Danladi clenched his fist. Then you have made your choice, he hissed. You and that child mean nothing to me from now on. With that, he turned and stormed out of the square, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. Bako stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Zakiyya's shoulder. I don't care if this child carries my name or not. All I want is to love you and raise him as my own. Zakiyya's heart swelled with gratitude, but fear still gnawed at her. The village may not accept us, Bako. They will say we disrespected tradition. Bako smiled softly. Let them talk. As long as we stand together, nothing else matters. Malam Yusuf cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Since Danladi has rejected the child, the council will respect Zakiyya's choice. She is free to live with Bako and raise her son. We wish them peace, but they must understand that the path they have chosen will not be easy. The elders tapping their walking sticks on the ground, signaling the end of the meeting. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring about what they had just experienced. Zakiyya felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The weight of tradition had been lifted, but she knew the road ahead would be full of challenges. As she and Bako walked away from the square, baby in hand, she whispered, "Do you think we'll ever be truly free, Bako?" Bako smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. "Maybe not, but we have each other, and that's a good place to start." But just as they reached their compound, an unexpected visitor arrived, Danlade's brother Musa, with a grim expression. "This isn't over," he said darkly. "Danlade has gone to the chief, and he won't let things rest. You'd better be ready." Zakiyya's heart sank. Could it be that their troubles were just beginning? Zakiyya's heart raised as Musa's warning sank in. Bako tightened his grip on her hand, sensing the fear creeping back into her. "What does Danlade want now?" Bako asked, his voice sharp with frustration. "He made his choice in front of the elders. He cannot come back now and change things." Musa shook his head slowly, his expression grim. He's not going back on his words, but he went straight to the chief to demand punishment, not just for Zakiyya, but for both of you. Zakiyya gasped. "Punishment? For what?" Musa's gaze hardened. "For dishonoring him and the village's customs. Danlade claims that allowing you to leave him and live with another man will bring shame to the entire community. He wants the chief to strip you both of your rights and banish you." Bako's jaw clenched, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. Banishment? All because she followed her heart? Musa nodded solemnly. "The chief is considering it. Danlade knows how to bend things to his advantage. If the council believes him, they may declare that both of you have dishonored the land. They won't care about love. Zakiyya, all they see is broken tradition." Zakiyya's knees wobbled, and Bako caught her before she could fall. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I just wanted peace. I never thought it would come to this." Bako pulled her close, brushing a tear off her cheek. "We will face this together," he murmured. "I won't let them destroy us." Musa glanced around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "There may be a way out," he said cautiously. Zakiyya and Bako exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Bako asked. Musa lowered his voice. "If you leave the village before the chief makes his decision, there will be nothing for them to rule over. But you must go tonight. If you wait until morning, the chief's men will be at your door." Zakiyya's heart pounded in her chest. "Leave? But where will we go?" Bako took a deep breath. "I know someone in a nearby town, an old friend who owes me a favor. We can start over there." Zakiyya hesitated. Leaving the village meant abandoning everything she had ever known, her family, her home, her identity. But staying meant certain disgrace and punishment. She looked at her newborn son, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "We have to go," she whispered, "for him." That night, under the cover of darkness, Zakiyya, Bako and Musa gathered their few belongings. They moved quietly, avoiding the watchful eyes of neighbors who might report them to the chief. As they reached the edge of the village, Musa turned to them. "This is why I leave you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't go with you, or Danlade will suspect me. But I will tell him you've left and try to buy you some time." Zakiyya hugged Musa tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I will never forget this." Bako shook Musa's hand firmly. "You are a good man. If we make it, we owe you everything." Musa gave them a small sad smile. "Just be happy and it will be enough." With one last glance at the village they once called home, Zakiyya and Bako slipped into the night, carrying their baby and the hope of a new beginning. They traveled for hours until they reached the border of the next town. Exhausted but determined, they knocked on the door of Bako's old friend Kawu, a rugged trader who lived on the outskirts. Kawu opened the door, surprised to see them. Bako, what are you doing here in the middle of the night? Bako gave him a tired smile. I will explain everything, but we need a place to stay for a while. Kawu's gaze shifted to Zakiyya and the baby. Without hesitation, he stepped aside. Come in, you're safe here. But as they settled inside, Zakiyya couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at her heart. What if Danladi found them? What if the chief sent men after them? She cradled her baby tightly, whispering a silent prayer. Would this new town bring them peace? Or had they only exchanged one danger for another? Would Zakiyya and Bako's escape bring them freedom? Or will Danladi's influence reach beyond the village? Can they truly start over? Or is their past waiting to catch up with them? Just as Zakiyya began to relax in Kawu's modest home, something felt off. Bako's old friend was being too accommodating, too eager to help. Days passed, and though they stayed hidden, Zakiyya's unease only grew. Kawu kept asking too many questions. How did you escape Danladi? Does the chief know you're here? Are you sure no one saw you leave? One night, Zakiyya overheard Bako and Kawu talking in low voices outside. She pressed her ear to the door. I don't like this, Kawu, Bako said. I feel like someone's watching us. Kawu's laugh was nervous. Relax, you're safe here. But something in his tone sent chills down Zakiyya's spine. Later that night, as Bako held their baby and Zakiyya tried to sleep, she saw a faint light from the crack under the door. Someone was outside the door. Her heart pounded. Bako, she whispered urgently, shaking him awake. Someone's there. They both held their breaths, listening. A low voice whispered outside, then another. Zakiyya's blood ran cold. He found us, she whispered, her voice trembling. Bako's eyes widened. He grabbed the baby and without waiting another second, they darted to the back of the house, sneaking out into the dark. As they slipped through the shadows, they heard the door burst open behind them. And Danladi's angry voice thundered inside. Where are they? Kawu's shaky voice answered. I told you they would still be here. Zakiyya's heart sank. Kawu had betrayed them. He had sold them out to Danladi, perhaps hoping to gain favor or money. There was no time to think. She clutched Bako's arm and they ran as fast as they could into the night. The baby stared in Bako's arms, starting to cry. They couldn't stop now. Danladi and his men were not far behind, torches lighting up the night as they gave chase. Zakiyya's breath itched, fear choking her. Would they escape, or was this the end? Bako whispered through gritted teeth. We need to cross the river now. It's the only way to lose them. Zakiyya nodded, her legs burning with exhaustion. But she didn't dare slow down. The river roared ahead, fast and dangerous under the moonlight. They reached the edge, panting, hearts racing. No bridge, Zakiyya gasped. There is no time, Bako said. We jump. With no other choice, they plunged into the icy water just as Danladi's men appeared on the bank, torches blazing. The current was strong, pulling Zakiyya under. She fought to stay afloat, her baby's cries barely audible over the rush of water. Bako swam beside her, struggling to keep them together. Hold on, Zakiyya, he shouted. But just as they neared the far bank, a cold hand grabbed Zakiyya's ankle, dragging her under. She kicked frantically, her lungs burning as she fought for air. When she looked back, her heart stopped. It was Danladi in the water, his face twisted with rage. You are mine, Zakiyya, he snarled. Zakiyya kicked harder, her survival instincts kicking in. Just as her strength began to fail, Bako appeared, striking Danladi with all his might. Let her go. Danladi's grip loosened for a moment. Just enough. Zakiyya broke free, gasping for air and as Bako shoved that laddie back into the swirling current. The river swept him away, his furious screams echoing in the night. They collapsed on the river bank, drenched and exhausted but alive. The baby coughed, then let out a strong cry, filling Zakiyya's heart with a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Bako wrapped his arms around her, his voice shaky but determined. "We made it, Zakiyya. We are free." But as Zakiyya looked down the dark road ahead, she knew their journey was far from over. They had escaped death that night, but what if it wasn't the last time? And then, just before she could catch her breath, she saw something glowing faintly from Bako's wet pocket. A small amulet she had never seen before. Zakiyya froze, her eyes narrowing. "Bako, what is that?" Bako hesitated for a moment too long. It's nothing," he whispered, shoving it deeper into his pocket. But Zakiyya knew better. There was more to Bako's past than he had told her, and their real fight for survival was just beginning.